of you guys for joining us at the for this Florida Friendly Landscaping webinar series that we've launched this year in Broward County. Tonight's presentation is going to be led by our amazing agent Vincent Encomio. And he's prepared a really great presentation that I'm really excited to listen to on preparing Florida for a future in green infrastructure. And so I've shared with all of you guys that this presentation will be recorded. And a little bit about Vincent. I mean, he is actually his geographic area, he is a sea grant agent. So his geographic area focuses in the Treasure Coast, specifically Martin and St. Lucie County. Okay, and so these two counties are comprised of the southern end of the Indian River Lagoon, which is the most biodiverse estuary in North America. So both counties contribute a combined 1.16 billion to the total lagoon-related economy. So this economic output represents the contributions related to fisheries, marine industries, recreation, and tourism. Resource management, which is air, water, waste, and conservation programs, administration, and defense and aerospace. So environmental impacts to the lagoon and its Treasure Coast tributary, the St. Lucie estuary, such as Harma, alga blooms that you guys have heard of.
No.
Make sure you mute yourself. Yeah. Issues such as stormwater pollution and loss of coastal habitats are definitely among some of the top concerns of local residents regarding the health of the lagoon. So Vincent's extensions programming is directed towards these concerns, which we can certainly relate to, whether, you're in St. Lucie, obviously here in South Florida. And so he brings science-based information on these topics through stormwater education, citizen science programs in shoreline, water quality monitoring, and education on estuarine habitats and living shorelines through the Florida Master Naturalist Program and the Living Shoreline Training for Marine Contractors, which I'm sure he's going to talk all about it during his presentation, right, Vincent? So with that, I am going to just hand it on to you. Thank you for joining us today, and we're excited for your presentation.
Cool. Thank you, Lorna. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And and my screen is still shared, right? And everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, you're good to
Yes?
go.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So I'd like to talk about some of the extension programming we've been doing related to living shorelines. So the theme in general, it sounds like, for your webinar series, Lorna, is Florida friendly landscaping. And so what's interesting, I think, about living shorelines is I really think a lot of times we do different, extension agents have different expertise, they work in different areas, but I really feel like living shorelines is kind of where Florida friendly landscaping and what we do in Sea Grant really kind of can really mesh together very well. But first, before I get going, I'd like to know if people out there have heard of the term living shorelines. You can use, we can do this informally. You can either say yes in the chat, or if you can use the reaction button, if you guys are familiar with that, you can give me a thumbs up or whatever emoji reaction you would like to use. As long as you represent the one that's in the affirmative, or you can say no as well. I'm just curious to see how, what people know about living shorelines. We work with different audiences, and it's good to know.
I see some heads shaking, like no,
okay,
never heard
good.
of the term, and someone in the chat box said no. So feel free to use the chat box for that. Oh, someone said yes. Yes, someone said yes.
Great. Well, regardless of whether you say yes or no, what I think actually more so if you say no, I think I'm in the right place. So, so what I'm going to describe in my presentation is our ongoing extension work in living shorelines, and I'll get to the definition of that very shortly. But the other reason I'm very interested in presenting to you guys and in Laura's area is Broward County really poses some unique challenges for the work that we do. So I'd like to discuss, first I'll talk about our training, the educational efforts that we're undertaking regarding living shorelines. But I'd also like to discuss living shoreline practice within the context of Broward County and some potential approaches in your area. We taught a course in Miami, and that really opened our eyes and highlighted the importance of really knowing and understanding the local situation. And our work and living shoreline practice in general is completely place-based, meaning what might be successful one place is not necessarily going to be successful in another. And so we really have to understand where we're working to be successful in what we're trying to do with regards to living shorelines. But first, that situation I'd like to talk about is shoreline hardening, and meaning stabilizing our shorelines with seawalls, bulkheads, riprap, engineered, what we would call gray infrastructure, and an engineered approach to stabilizing our shoreline. And you'll see on the left and the right, the left sort of gives you the national setting. About 14% of our shorelines are hardened. And that is not just the beaches, but also our inland waterways, our bays, estuaries, tidal rivers, that sort of thing. And then on the right, you see we zoom in on Florida, and you'll probably recognize this is all by county. And you'll recognize the red area within the state of Florida on the right there. So this is shoreline armoring, coastal armoring is how we traditionally protect our assets, our properties from things like storms, and for us, particularly hurricanes are our big concern. And then we're also dealing with other things that are making it more challenging, like sea level rise and things like that, and king tides and coastal flooding from those phenomenon. And you can see, yeah, I mentioned that you can see the degrees of hardening or percentage of hardening based on counties. I will, from my perspective in Martin County, we're kind of in that mid-range, about 50%. That Martin County did a study actually back in 2013, I believe, that found that nearly 50% of our shorelines were hardened with seawalls and bulkheads and things like that. And so it's not too bad, but over 90% of those hardened shorelines were residential properties, meaning single family homes or residential communities. And that kind of, I'll speak on that in a bit. That I think is very important, and frames a lot of our goals for what we're trying to do in our extension education in living shorelines. And then of course you recognize this area over to the right here. That's you guys in Broward, with about 75 to 100% of the shorelines being hardened. And then more on that later too. But what problems do hardened shorelines pose? So if you look on the left, the before is sort of a natural shoreline. You've got a marsh there. This is an estuary where you've got, you see your blue crabs, oyster reefs. And normally when we have rising seas, not just because of sea level rise, but let's say tidal surge, higher than normal tides, surge due to storms, those natural habitats can migrate landward. They can move back and forth. And then when you put a hardened structure like a seawall or bulkhead, you've limited that habitat from being able to behave naturally, to move back and forth with changes in water level. And that causes, and if that habitat is now constrained from moving with changes in water levels. It's what we would call, a term that we use is coastal squeeze, where coastal habitats only have so much room to move back and forth. So that's a problem. The other problem, if I direct your attention to this image right here on the top right, is you've really fixed the location of that shoreline in one place and have therefore, at that point declared, this is the edge of our shoreline, when in nature, it's really a lot more fluid. And so you can't, you can also get things like erosion at the base and even behind the seawall or bulkhead. They have a definite lifespan. But by fixing that shoreline, you're saying, or what we've said as a society, as the global we have said, okay, this is where the edge of the coast is. This is where our shoreline is, never to change. And of course, that's not the case. Conditions are changing. If you're, and particularly in South Florida, we know this to be the case. And so that's a problem for us for our protecting our shorelines, for protecting our assets on our shorelines. Ecologically, you've lost that natural transition from land to sea. And what we're trying to regain with living shorelines is that ecological, that ecotone, basically that intertidal zone where a lot of productivity happens in our coastal environments. Regaining that land to sea interface, but at the same time, stabilizing our shorelines. And this is basically an artistic depiction of what we would call a living shoreline. And if it looks like a natural shoreline, that's intentional. But a lot of the idea is that you, in place of, and then we'll learn later, maybe in concert or in harmony with built infrastructure, you would install things like marsh grasses, your native coastal plants, mangroves, of course, in here. And then you could extend that concept further upland. And this is where I think that this area here, where all this vegetation is where that nice synergy between what we do in Sea Grant and what other IFAS extension agents in, say, horticulture and the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, I think that's where we really have synergy. And then moving past the low tide zone, things like oyster reefs, constructed oyster reefs that are shown here to help provide a more natural or living breakwater that might be self-sustaining over time. And then you can also add things like plankton seagrass. That's a big problem in the Indian River Lagoon, is loss of seagrass over time. But the whole goal of living shorelines are to stabilize the shoreline, to reduce the energy and wave energy that is heading, or erosion and wave energy that is impacting a shoreline, while at the same time restoring that connection between land and sea, which will ideally enhance biodiversity and ecosystem function, and even improve water quality, because you've got more natural elements that can absorb, say, stormwater running off from land to the water. But also things like oyster reefs are known to be very effective filters of water in our estuaries. And so you can actually hopefully improve water quality as well. And ultimately, what we want to do is use green infrastructure of living shorelines to increase our resiliency to storm damage and sea level rise. And just to show you some of that in demonstration. My colleague Savannah Berry, and I forgot to mention earlier, it's not just me, but Savannah Berry in the Nature Coast in the Big Bend area, specifically out of Cedar Key, Armando Ubeda in Sarasota County, Rick O'Connor in the Panhandle, and really the glue that holds us all together is we have a course coordinator, Mandy Bailey, who is based out of Broward County. So, and we work with, and I'll show later, we work with people, other agents and other agencies throughout the state. So this is just to show you, how resilient a well-planned, well-designed living shoreline can be. Last year, Cedar Key got hit very hard by Hurricane Idalia. And this is the top left photo is the before picture. And after it passed, you can see the after picture. Really not that much different. And what they had installed on this living shoreline were marsh plantings that you see here. You can see an oyster reef behind that, in more towards the water. These are new sort of oyster reef modules that Dr. Berry and Dr. Mark Clark at Cedar Key, the Nature Coast Biological Station in Cedar Key, had developed. And these are filled with oyster shells. The neat thing about these are plastic-free oyster restoration, oyster reef modules. So they're all completely natural material or biodegradable materials. And those are also helping to stabilize the beach here. And as you can see, the before and after pictures really aren't that different. But what they really did to demonstrate the effectiveness of the living shoreline, quantitatively, I think the picture speaks 1,000 words. But the numbers that you see here in orange or kind of golden they had placed some wave sensors that they made. They'd place them at specific points within the living shoreline. So the numbers that you see here are the incoming, the most water words numbers are the incoming wave energy, or the amount of energy those waves contained. And then they also place some sensors in specific areas of the living shoreline. And this is the change in wave energy, or in this case, the decrease in wave energy. Next to this, in this area here, is on the other side of this dock that you see here, is an area that had a standard bulkheaded shoreline. So no living shoreline elements, no plants, no oyster reefs, no oyster reef modules. This is the change in wave energy. So the percentages that you see in gold are the amount of wave attenuation, or the amount of wave energy that was decreased as a result of the elements that you see in the shoreline. So you had a much higher decrease in wave energy in the living shoreline compared to this traditional bulkheaded shoreline right here. So it only reduced waves by 2.8%. The living shoreline reduced wave energy by 20.7 and 15% respectively. So that was a really nice quantitative demonstration of what you see here visually on the left. But as I mentioned, and particularly when we're working with homeowners, we have a lot of barriers to living shoreline adoption. And I've highlighted some words in gold just to show, that idea. I'm not going to read all of them, but this idea that the belief that armoring is more effective, a lack of information about what other options they can take that might be more green, or what we call nature-based solutions, influenced by people around them. And that could be their neighbors. It's their neighbors and their contractors, really, is those major influences. What they're familiar with. They're more familiar with traditional shoreline hardening. And I highlight those words because really what we're looking at, lack of information, okay, that's education. The rest of those words that are highlighted, those are really social problems. Those are systemic issues that we need to address. We need to have more educated contractors and designers and homeowners. But it's right now we're dealing with a lot of barriers where people are resistant. People are resistant to change. People that work in the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program know what I'm talking about. Particularly, one example would be trying to convince people to not hurricane trim palms, for example. That's those kinds of social issues that become barriers to implementing more environmentally friendly, more nature-based solutions to our environment. And so we have these sort of three entities: the property owners, their contractors, and then of course the regulatory agencies that they have to deal with. When those things are all aligned, that's where we hope to be, and where we hope to make change in people being more open-minded to nature-based solutions like living shorelines. So back in 2018, before I started with IFAS, several of my colleagues, they initiated this course here, and it's really to teach marine contractors about living shorelines. So sort of tackling the contractor side of it. And so the goal was to increase the number of contractors who are trained in living shoreline practices. It's a 2-day course, and then we've offered this throughout the state. During the pandemic, we actually offered it virtually, and that really gave us our start to where we are now with this course. But the course, it's 2 days. Of course, we have lectures. We have a lot of hands-on activities, design scenarios. Also, we teach them about permitting, from state and federal permitting that are required, especially when you're doing work past the mean high water or past that high tide line. So that's where a lot of the partnerships are, where we engage our state partners, DEP, our federal partners, the Army Corps of Engineers, and then all the other potential partners at a location that we decide to have the course. But you can see there's paper and pen exercises. We also work with a lot of just props and Legos and clay and toy plants and things like that. And also, here's some examples of some of the pen and paper type exercises that we have. And these are involved in designing, designing living shorelines, kind of imagining, sort of these perfect world scenarios based on the conditions that we give them. So we give them different scenarios. They design living shorelines, considering all the conditions or situations that we give them. So in this case, on the left, they created a kayak access in between the oyster reefs, and so that people could enjoy the living shoreline. Person on the right had a lot of fun here, imagining a really nice living shoreline that even maybe alien visitors and dinosaurs could enjoy. We also do site visits to actual living shoreline locations, depending on where we are. And I'll show those locations a little bit later. This is sort of a breakdown of who we've had in our audience. So we've had a fair amount from government, meaning local government. So we do have we usually have state and federal agency people teaching the class with us, mainly on permitting, and maybe occasionally have maybe some of their new staff take the class. But really, a lot of our government representatives have been local governments. So these are maybe county or city governments that are interested in knowing more about living shorelines, particularly because they may be dealing with development projects that where there might be a decision of whether to have some combination of green infrastructure with gray infrastructure or green infrastructure entirely. In Martin County, I will say that they're really encouraging people that are, whether they're homeowners or commercial developers, to consider green or nature-based solutions like living shorelines when they're building on the coast. And some local governments are even developing ordinances related about that. And that's some of the reasons why they took the course. Of course, we have our private sector well represented through either private businesses, contractors, consultants, however they identify themselves. And then lastly, we also have community groups, individual homeowners and nonprofits, and occasional academics taking the course as well. So we've had some good results with regards to knowledge gain. We issue CEUs to those professionals that are interested in attaining those from the Florida Construction Industry and Licensing Board, Society for Ecological Restoration, and the Florida Nursery, Landscape, and Growers Association. We've seen some good results so far. This is we do these behavior change surveys every 6 months post course, so we're kind of on our next round of surveying our last group of courses. Here. And so this is just a range of behaviors that we're trying to identify that people have done since taking the course. Ideally, we want more people installing living shorelines. But then here's some nice comments we've gotten over time from teaching the class. But our living shorelines sort of training landscape is not just this contracted course, but also, and this has been in existence well prior to the contractors training course, is the Florida Master Naturalist Program course in a special topics course in coastal shoreline restoration that was developed probably, if I'm guessing, maybe started around 2014, 2015. I'm actually teaching that course later this month with my fellow St. Lucie County Extension agent, Ken Joelli. He's a natural resources agent. But between the two courses, this really represents sort of our attempt to reach that kind of living shoreline nirvana, so to speak, between the homeowners, the contractors, and other restoration professionals. And that's really the role we're playing in Extension, is trying to facilitate those connections, co-educating these audiences, either in one or both of those courses. We've had contractors taking the Master Naturalist course as well. The difference between the two is that the Master Naturalist course, I'll go back just real quick, the Master Naturalist course is really focused on the ecology of the different habitats that might comprise a living shoreline: mangroves, oyster reefs, marshes, and really digging into the biology and ecology of each of those environments. While the contractor's course is really getting into the nitty-gritty of design, installation, permitting, all those practices that someone might pay someone to do. So we've been really going hard, going really gung-ho about this the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. We've been teaching this class, the contractors class, and we've just completed 12 locations throughout the state of Florida. And those stars represent where we've been over almost the last 2 years. We've recently got a renewal or a new grant from EPA to continue this training for at least the next couple of years. So hopefully we'll be coming to places like Broward, County and some of the other counties throughout Florida coastal counties that we've missed. But getting into Broward, coming back to that, a place like Broward is really challenging for us because a lot of the coastal areas, a lot of the waterways there's so much shoreline hardening. And we learned that in our Miami course that, we've really got to we might need to rethink how some of the things that we teach in the course, even some of the photos that we use in some of our course modules, because we've got to really, it was different enough in Miami, and I think it's really different in Broward. It's even more hardened shorelines, and that's important. It's a concern because as our sea levels are rising, continuing to rise, and we have new homes that will now occupy what's designated as a coastal flood zone in 2050. It might not be in the flood zone now, but it will be by 2050. We've got an enormous value of properties, and of course we're in that that top 3 of states that have the most homes at risk in that 2050 coastal flood zone. And I show you this photo here. This is a famous photo from a few years back. This is a parking garage in Miami, and that's an octopus, a real octopus swimming in salt water in that parking garage. That is completely from tidal flooding, or what we call sunny day flooding, or king tides. And this is becoming a regular occurrence in South Florida. This is actually from Fort Lauderdale, and a study back in 2018 estimated by 2100 high tide flooding will occur practically every other day, maybe even more often. So you can see those tidal waters are above that seawall. Remember, I mentioned that when we built those seawalls, we kind of designated that as that's our forever, shoreline, and that's just not the case anymore. So how do we deal with this, especially in a place like Broward County? Because the coastal flooding we might think of it as just a nuisance. We can just put our rubber boots on and walk through it, no problem. But a lot of times, especially when it comes to king tides, that's salt water. So how's that going to impact that car if they don't realize they better wash their undercarriage off really well after driving through that? And then think about the impacts to roadways with regards to evacuation routes, shelters, hospitals, schools. So all that infrastructure that we need conveyance to. And then things like saltwater intrusion of our groundwater and how that's impacting our other green areas that might not be used to that, and water treatment, stormwater systems. So that's a big problem when we have king tide flooding events in places like Miami, is how that impacts the functioning of stormwater systems. And when that washes back into those waterways, the stuff that it's bringing with it. So I want to show this, and just to kind of harken back to some of the green solutions or nature-based solutions that might be right in front of us. I'm gonna go off my presentation just for a minute, actually not even a minute, 13 seconds to be exact. And this is probably a conference somewhere in Europe, I forget now, but they're using a wave tank. And really what they're describing is the importance of natural coastal protection. In our case, that really is mangroves. So let me go back. And it's a pretty powerful video. I use it a lot. And you can check it out. Later on I can put it in the link in the chat. But this, I think, also illustrates that well. You know, we've got a lot of the things that we already have a lot of the things that are important in coastal protection that if we leave alone, we really don't have to do much. You know, so this is illustrating the importance of mangroves in coastal protection. And mangroves are an important element of living shorelines in South Florida. And this study was done just to, again, emphasizing that this study was done, I think back in 2020 by UC Santa Cruz and Nature Conservancy. And this organization called RMS, they're really, I think they are like an insurance think tank. And what this is showing here, the work that they've done is they've modeled a couple different scenarios. This is during Hurricane Irma, and we all know Hurricane Irma, that was this very significant event. This is the degree on the left, it's the degree of coastal flooding in Southwest Florida as a result of Hurricane Irma. And then this is the scenario, what they hypothesized to be as a modeling exercise, what the coastal flooding would have looked like without mangroves as coastal protection. So you can see that right there. So their estimate is that by virtue of having that natural coastal protection of mangroves, it reduced flood damage by about 25% to the properties behind them in Collier County alone, which equates to averting about $1.5 billion in flood damage. And I think this picture really just sums it up to me, without needing data, without needing, this is it right here. You know, so we have to recognize the importance of natural infrastructure in protecting us from storms and sea level rise and coastal flooding. And Broward County has recognized that. So this is a program, this is a document that I found a few years ago called the Resilient Shorelines Program. I put the link there. I will put that in the chat later if you want to download the brochure and check it out. And and a lot of counties, a lot of coastal counties are developing resiliency programs. And some of those people represent some of our local government staff that have been taking our class. But the idea is envisioning and providing and educating Broward County residents on more nature-based alternatives to managing their shoreline and protecting their shoreline. So they give some depictions here, even estimating how, you know, the differences in cost between a traditional seawall and a living shoreline. These are, I don't know if these are accurate or, you know, these are based on 2018 numbers, so they're also out of date as well. But the whole idea was providing to the Broward County residents some of the things that they could do to be more resilient to our changes in our coastline, like sea level rise. Another example of that is right in my area in Martin County in the city of Stuart. This is a public area, but a couple of organizations, Orca, they're a really great nonprofit, collaborated with IFAS and the city of Stuart to create what we call a buffered shoreline. So it's very similar. I would say it's a cousin of living shorelines. It's really designed to improve or retain or improve water quality by preventing stormwater runoff from land into that waterway that you see there, that boat channel right there. But using native plants, appropriate native plants for a coastal area, and applying friendly Florida friendly landscaping principles. You know, right plant, right place is probably the most important one. And you can see this, and I've seen examples of this in other areas of Miami, and I don't know if there's any in Broward, but I imagine that with their resiliency programs that they're starting to do things like that. And we also teaching this class in this Living Shorelines Contractors class in not just Miami, but even in Martin County, knowing we have a lot of hardened shorelines, we really have to reconcile our built environment with our goals, for the natural environment, and maybe, having hybrid options might be the way moving forward. I never recommend just someone destroy their seawall. That's a pretty radical approach. Of course, there are examples of failing seawalls where it might be a good approach to remove some of that structure and replace it with a living shoreline. But this article here really talks about, well, maybe what we really should be looking at how the nature in our built environments can work in harmony with each other. And in this article, they have this artistic depiction. This is downtown Miami, in the Miami River, and you can see the existing condition on the top of that waterfront, and then envisioning, what a nature-based hybrid living shoreline would look like, as additional coastal protection, in addition to that existing seawall. And that is sort of an artistic depiction, but that actually has real world examples right in the Lake Worth Lagoon. Palm Beach County Division of Environmental Resource Management has done an amazing job in Lake Worth Lagoon working with, it's completely urbanized estuary, except for maybe the small portions of the north end, but the rest of it is completely urbanized. And they've been able to design these hybrid options to increase the resiliency of those coastal areas. So this is what we would call a mangrove planter. They've built this riprap structure and filled it, and then planted mangroves or marsh grasses in the middle of that. And here, that's on a smaller scale. You can see it on a larger scale. And then in the background, if you can see, they've actually created islands that serve as oyster reef habitat, planted with mangroves. These mangrove planters that are buttressing seawalls are really providing not only additional coastal protection, but regaining some ecological function in those areas that were this is almost completely an urbanized setting. And this can be done on the small scale as well, possibly in seawalled canal areas. If you've got the space, this kind of structure can be built on a maybe even a single waterfront home scale. And just going back to that thing, that small scale, even a single mangrove is providing coastal protection in this example. You can see here, you've got this nice healthy mangrove, and you've got land built up. The upland really is over here, behind it compared to over here. And again, it's additional natural protection in front of this existing bulkhead right here, or seawall. And I'll leave you with that. And the idea is, there's a number of options that we can take with living shorelines, what we would call fully natural, where there's no hard elements, no gray infrastructure. But the reality is, many places, particularly in South Florida, we've got to consider these hybrid options. And I just wanted to acknowledge the full range of partners that have been involved in this Living Shoreline contracting course over the last couple of years. And you can see there's a pretty wide range of people that have helped us organize and teach the course. some additional acknowledgments are some specific individuals from those agencies that have really been instrumental in helping this course get off the ground and be successful in the different locations that we've taught it. And then also with the Florida Master Naturalist Program course as well. And with that, I could entertain any questions. I've also got this short survey link. Definitely will take less than 10 minutes if you wouldn't mind scanning that with your mobile device. I took it just as a practice, and it took like about 3 to 5 minutes. So if you got an opportunity, if you can do that, I'd really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. And while you guys are helping Vincent collect this important information, because, you know, we've been trying to get this very important topic to Broward. I know Vincent and I have talked about this, so I'm really happy to have seen your presentation, and I can see how further collaboration needs to happen. I think that that's wonderful, and definitely would like to do more collaborative work here in Broward County. There are a couple of questions that I'd like to bring up from the chat. It was very quiet. I know it was just everyone sort of diving into your presentation, but someone wanted to know, do living shorelines reduce property damage? And if so, can insurance companies be engaged to promote it?
Wow, that is an amazing question. And it speaks to a larger, you know, topic of how do we incorporate nature or natural infrastructure as elements that provide those kinds of benefits, you know, to the point where can it impact our premiums, you know? And I don't think there's some research starting in that realm, but for sure, you know, I talked about homeowners being resistant to change. Industries, probably like insurance companies, are resistant to change as well. So that is something that I really think is the next frontier. We're not there yet, though. They can reduce property damage. At least I showed that one example. But can we translate that reduction in property damage to insurance policies and premiums? We're definitely not there yet, but I definitely think that's the next frontier. With we really need to have that, to have a lot of people with that mindset working on that problem. It really gets into if you're not familiar with it, there's a lot of people that are doing work on what we call ecosystem services. So the science of ecosystem services. And when we say services, we really mean services to us. What are the benefits of preserving or restoring a natural habitat or ecosystem? And do those benefits, let's say, do they translate into things like can we evaluate that? Like if you're talking about nutrient credits, for example, you know, we know that oyster reefs can help cycle nitrogen efficiently. You know, and they can take up, there's research that's showing they can take up X amount of nitrogen and then remove that from the environment as a habitat. How much is that worth in terms of, you know, the dollars to remediate nitrogen pollution? You know, how much are there's work looking at ecosystem services to fisheries. How much, what's the value of an acre of seagrass? What's the dollar value of an acre of oyster reefs? You know, what's the dollar value of a fringe of mangroves? And in that case, you know, what does that mean in protecting private properties? So I think that is, to me, I think that's the next frontier in terms of sort of making that transition from ecology, studying ecosystem services, translating that into policy that then gets translated into truly benefiting us as a society. Unfortunately, we're not there yet.
What kind of citizen science projects are you are you looking into engaging? Like, we'll be interested here in Broward.
So things I've done, I've worked with volunteers on restoring oyster reefs. I did a living shoreline planting project with some kids back in the spring here in Martin County. So there's those kinds of projects, but also working with some partners at UCF, University of Central Florida, trying to develop computer modeling tools that can help assess the benefits of a living shoreline, or first the natural habitats that are already there, like mangroves and oyster reefs, and seeing if we can use those computer modeling tools to prioritize places we should do restoration. And what's involved in that is basically going out in the field and collecting data on different shorelines and giving that data to UCF so they can input it into their model.
Interesting.
So we're characterizing shorelines that are completely built with seawalls, natural, and everything in between. And the goal of that project is to basically map the entire Indian River Lagoon, which is Volusia County all the way to the northern end of Palm Beach County.
I know we have an architect in the house, and so the question is, how long might it take for the implementation of a living shoreline to take effect?
Yeah, that's also another $1 million question. Very important question. I've seen it take maybe anywhere from a trajectory of 1 to 3 years. We really need to do more research on that. You know, one of the last photos I showed in the acknowledgments was a living shoreline that I installed a number of years ago. And it's really, site selection is key. If you want to use oyster habitat as kind of a natural self-sustaining breakwater that will protect plantings further landward, you really need to make sure that you're putting not only the right material, but that it's the right site for that. It may not be one site that we did where we put out oyster shell to create oyster reef breakwaters. It happened. We did pick an area that had a very high oyster recruitment, so there was always new babies coming into that site, and it took about 6 or 7 months for that to be a fully realized what at least the small scale structure looked like an oyster reef of what you might see in the wild. So really, site selection is key. Defining your goals for what you want to accomplish, what kind of habitats that you want to be successful, and matching the installations and the methods and materials that you use to match those goals is key. But in that particular case, and then we planted marsh grass behind those oyster reefs, I would say it was about 3 or 4 years before it really took hold. But that's only for that one site. I think it varies a lot site to site. So it's a tough question to try to answer.
Yeah, there's a comment on a location, and in most of Miami, there's land or shoreline left between the buildings and the ocean. I know you were in Miami recently, so you must have been briefed with the folks in South Florida.
Yeah. And so that's a tough Miami. So the other thing that's tough about that is, you've got buildings and seawalls right on the edge there. The other tough thing that was challenge is regulatory. A lot of areas, say in Biscayne Bay, is in aquatic preserve, and that's managed by the state, meaning DEP in that case. And it's if someone wanted to, say, build one of those hybrid living shorelines like those mangrove planters, they really have to make sure that there's no natural resources that would be impacted by that. And some of the people in DEP that I've talked to that work in that area, and this is a good thing, they could have seagrass all the way up to the edge of that wall. Or there's even areas where they even have corals. So we don't want to be in conflict with that. So
Yeah.
So it's very tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah, very tricky, very important work that you're doing. And I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. I mean, you've held a captive audience steady. It is 7:30. And again, if there's no other questions, oh wait, hold on, something just popped in. Oh, someone said thank you. This was
Oh,
great
you're welcome. Thank you
presentation.
so much. Appreciate it.
And please, I hope that you did engage with the survey. And again, I will be recording. It's being recorded. So I will be sharing this. If you want a copy, just send me an email, lbravo1@ufl.edu. Vincent, I know you wanted a copy. And thank you for joining us tonight. I wanted to be faithful to our time together, as everybody, hopefully, if not, you'll catch your dinner or late dinner. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. And in next month, on October 8th, we have a wonderful presentation on growing food in small spaces. So Dr. Norma will be joining us, and that will be October 8th on a webinar lecture series. So we'll be, hopefully you can join us. But any questions you have, just email me. And thank you very much. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Lorna, I also put my email in the chat. If anybody wants to follow up with me, I'd be happy to continue any discussions.
Don't worry, Vincent,
you
you're gonna be coming in more of a local over here pretty soon. So.
Okay.
Thank you. I can see
All
great,
right.
great collaboration. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.